Hello, and welcome to a very special video about what's going on with the rate of inflation, because as we know, the goal for low inflation is to have the average general level of prices rising at 2 to 3% on average over time. And lately, that's kind of jumped up beyond that. Like we had 3.8% in the July quarter and now 3% in the September quarter. So like, what's the deal with that? We're going to talk about that, kind of give some reasons for it, and also talk about whether or not the goal is being achieved or not, because the goal being on average over time, kind of, has it been on average over time, even though it's there now, as well as kind of getting into the underlying rate of inflation or the trend mean inflation and why that's a little bit different. So if we look at the graph and we look at it here, we can look at since July of 2020. So in July, we had the July quarter 2020 or the June quarter 2020, we had negative 3% deflation occurred there. So deflation occurred in 2020, and since then we've had positive rates of inflation, 0.7%, 0.9%, 1.1%, 3.8% in the July quarter 2021, and then 3% in the September quarter of 2021. So inflation spiked up and then started to come back down. Why it spiked in this quarter is basically because of that deflation, because we're bouncing back from that. The inflation rate is just the 3 quarterly rates of inflation added together. So when you've got it, when you're bouncing back from a negative and that negative suddenly isn't included, it's going to look much higher of a spike. Whereas now we're just dealing with what's actually happening currently. So we've eased back down to that 3%, and that's probably potentially going to fall further based on the ongoing effects of lockdowns, etc. Although the last few months of the year could impact it, because inflation always spikes a little bit around the festive period. So the December quarter will be really interesting to look at. But in the same period for this, the underlying inflation rate was 1.6% when it was 3.8%, and then it increased to 2.1%. So if we take out once-off volatile items, the inflation rate's only actually increased to 2.1%, which is at the lower end of the goal. And even then, our goal is on average over time. That means over a business cycle being 3 to 5 years. So if we look at the time here, on average, we are not going to be, if we had an average line going through, it would actually just hang out and be below that 2% line. What I drew wasn't a very good indication of that, but would be below 2 to 3% on average over time. Would be trending towards the goal now, which is the important thing to talk about. We're trending towards it. Some of the important things that happened that led to the inflation rate being what it is. Fuel prices increased by 36%. So that's obviously going to lead to prices increasing a bit, as well as audiovisual equipment and furniture increasing in price significantly due to supply chain disruptions. And then we also had price decreases. Fruit and vegetables decreased by over 8%, and clothing decreased by 5.5% because the impacts of lockdowns and businesses having to sell off excess stock. So there was some deflation that occurred at the same time, but having 36% inflation in fuel prices is obviously going to drive that number up. And during a lockdown, do fuel prices actually impact everyone? While we're locked down, people weren't driving as much, so that inflation is not actually going to impact everyone to the level that it would now that we're opening up. Now that we're opening up, higher fuel prices obviously significantly going to impact people's material living standards, and therefore probably their non-material as well. But in the short term, during that time, rising fuel prices probably aren't going to affect households anywhere near as much in Victoria, Sydney, Victoria, New South Wales, etc. So that's a lot of what's going on with inflation. So is the goal being achieved? We're moving towards the goal. On average, we're moving towards the goal. Although we have measured above it or at the higher end of it now, on average over time, we are moving towards that goal is how I would say that is occurring. And that's essentially it for the rate of inflation. So that's what's going on with it. That's a lot of information about it in a short period of time. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk about a specific individual piece of data. If there's anything else you want to know about the inflation rate or any other economic indicator, hit me up, show at therunningeconomy.com, or head to that website, therunningeconomy.com, where there's blogs, stuff, all kinds of resources. If you haven't already, hit us up on our Running Economy Discord, where students from other schools that are super, super smart help each other out. It's wonderful. It's a great community. Get involved. Other than that, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.